It didn't start with late nights or perfume I didn't recognize. It started with the phone. We had a quiet kind of life, the sort you don't post about because there's nothing to prove. Dinner around 8 most nights, a walk when the weather cooperated, weekend errands that turned into inside jokes about how we were the most boring couple in the world. For years, that boredom felt like safety. If love is a house, ours was the kind with squeaky floorboards and a door that sticks in damp weather, imperfect, familiar, lived in. Lately, though, the glow of Anna's screen had become its own room in that house, a door I couldn't open. She used to leave her phone on the kitchen counter charging, notifications lighting up like little birds hopping along a wire. If something made her laugh, she'd call me over and hold the phone out. "Look," she'd say, and I'd lean into her shoulder while a video played. Somewhere along the line, that stopped. The phone moved closer to her body, pocket, hand, under a throw blanket, and the screen turned away when I entered a room. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Everyone goes through phases with social media. A friend group reactivates. A hobby gets loud. Algorithms decide you like dog videos, and suddenly that's 30 minutes gone before bed. I shrugged at it the way you shrug at a light bulb flicker, just electricity doing what electricity does. But it escalated. A few weeks in, she set a new passcode. I only noticed because I heard the trilling lock sound and saw her thumb pause before typing, a tiny hesitation that suggested she was still memorizing it. Later she added Face ID. The change itself wasn't the problem. Privacy is a reasonable thing, but the timing brushed against something in me. It felt like taking keys off a shared hook and closing a drawer softly, so it wouldn't be heard. Our conversation shifted, too. When I asked about her day, the answers got shorter, sanded down to smooth edges. "Fine, busy, lots of meetings." She used to be a terrible liar in the best way, oversharing, getting details wrong, interrupting herself with a joke. Now she sounded rehearsed. At dinner, she'd keep the phone to her left, screen down, but every vibration tugged at her like a string. If I asked who it was, she'd smile without teeth and say, "Just the group chat," as if the group chat were a person with a name and a right to privacy. The first concrete thing I noticed had nothing to do with messages. It was laughter. We were watching a show, something light with background jokes you mostly miss unless you aren't paying attention, and her phone buzzed. She opened it, glanced, and bit her lip to stifle a grin. Not a broad laugh she would share, just a private smile that stayed private. I asked what was funny. "Oh, nothing," she said, the vowel stretched a fraction too long. The moment was so small, it almost shouldn't have existed, and yet it did. Our home routines changed in other ways that only make sense when you line them up. She began. Taking a bath. Most evenings, something she hadn't done regularly since our first winter together. To each their own ritual, I told myself. But the bath included the phone. I could hear the tinny echo of videos, the low murmur of her voice. Once or twice I knocked to ask if she wanted tea, and after a long pause she would say, "I'm good," the words landing like she'd been interrupted during a delicate operation. She picked up a new enthusiasm for photos. Not of us. Of herself. Older Anna had a camera roll of landscapes, food, and accidentally charming shots of me blinking. New Anna took mirror selfies, with careful angles and captions that were more caption than content. The photos didn't bother me by themselves. Everyone's allowed to feel good and show it, but they came with a new category of comment from accounts I didn't recognize. "You're glowing," back at it. Fire emojis stacked like kindling. I'm not the jealous type. Jealousy exhausts me. But I scrolled a little and saw pages full of gym selfies, travel reels, and the particular grammar of men who learned how to compliment without using nouns. If I asked about the commenters, she'd wave her hand. "Oh, just people from the running group." I hadn't known she joined a running group. She said it like I had forgotten something she'd told me, and we both let that lie sit on the table, tepid and unclaimed. We still had good hours. Sunday mornings when the light came in soft and she asked if I wanted pancakes. A Thursday we both worked from home and ate leftovers standing up, laughing at the cat's impossible attempt to fit into a bowl. Love doesn't vanish when suspicion enters. It learns to share space with it, and the cohabitation is uncomfortable. The first time I saw something concrete, it was by accident. I opened our laptop, old, slow, technically both of ours, to pay a bill, and a notification bounced in the corner. Instagram, new login on your account. I almost dismissed it, assuming it was me. Then I saw the location, a town not ours, a hotel Wi-Fi name that sounded like a chemistry experiment. Right then, Anna walked in and the window disappeared as if the laptop had been embarrassed. "Everything okay?" I asked, casual. She nodded, kissed the top of my head, and said, "Yeah, the pea crisp." That night, she posted a story, a boomerang of clinking glasses from Girls' Night. I watched it once, then again. In one frame, less than a second, you could see a reflection in a restaurant window. The shape next to her wasn't a woman's. It could have been anything, the passing form of a waiter, a stranger outside. I saved the story anyway, feeling foolish for turning into a detective over pixels. I reminded myself I had limits. I wouldn't check her phone. I wouldn't follow her. I wouldn't change into someone I wouldn't want to be around. But I needed to anchor myself. I started a simple list in the Notes app. Date, event, explanation. No conclusions, just facts. Mon bath, 45 minutes, call. Wed, running group, return 22:40. Friday, girls' night story, reflection. The habit itself calmed me, the way balancing a checkbook calms people who like numbers. Money, always an honest witness, began to speak. Small charges at places that didn't match her, with Laura, stories, a wine bar with soft lighting, a cafe we'd said we'd try together but never did. Nothing extravagant, nothing that couldn't be explained by a meetup or a work catch-up, if explanation were offered. It wasn't. I didn't ask. I wrote. A friend complicates all timelines. Mine, Peter, is the kind who says too much with good intentions. We ran into him at the grocery store on a Saturday. Anna in a cap and leggings, me holding a basket with lemons and a loaf of bread like a still life. "Didn't you two go to that new gallery on Thursday?" he asked. "I thought I saw you from the tram." We hadn't. Anna had said she was at a late work dinner. She laughed and said, "Must have been my double." Peter laughed too and wandered toward the dairy aisle, and I felt the air move between my ribs in a way that wasn't breathing. I didn't confront her that night. We made pasta and watched a movie I didn't absorb. Later, when she went to shower, I looked at our shared calendar on the fridge, the magnetic one with dry erase boxes. In her quick handwriting, a generic block. Meet, 7 p.m. I remembered when that used to read. Dinner, Laura, the loud one. I added my own entry in quiet handwriting. Call plumber, because the sink had started to cough. The ordinary act felt like a plea for ordinary itself. The next day, she announced she'd be out late again. "Sophie's birthday, drinks," she said, scrolling, not looking up. We know Sophie. Everyone knows Sophie. Sophie is loud and posts everything. At 10, when Anna texted, "Home late, don't wait," I opened Instagram and tapped through Sophie's story. She was at her parents' house, eating cake at a kitchen table I recognized from 2 Christmases. I closed the app and stared at my thumb like it had done something wrong. Something in me shifted then, not anger into action, not grief into resolve. It was more like a leveling of a table with a folded coaster, a choice to stop arguing with gravity. I set boundaries for myself. I wouldn't accuse without proof I could touch. I wouldn't ask questions I already knew would be turned back on me as insecurity. But I would treat patterns like weather, prepare as if the forecast were true, even if I still hoped for sun. A week later, a comment appeared under one of her mirror photos from an account with a blank profile picture and a name made of first name plus here. Missed last night already. It vanished within an hour, deleted or hidden. I wouldn't have noticed if the notification hadn't lingered on her lock screen when she set the phone down to tie her shoe. She picked it up quickly, as if it were hot. I didn't say her name. I said, "Do we need anything from the store?" She exhaled like a deflated balloon and listed eggs, spinach, oat milk. We didn't drink oat milk. I bought it anyway. All this time, love kept showing up in stupid, stubborn ways. I saved the last ripe peach for her. She brought me tea when I worked too late. We fell asleep back to back, a posture that was either distance or teamwork, depending on your mood. In the morning she tucked the duvet around my shoulder before she left, and I pretended not to wake so that tenderness could be anonymous. Then, an accident of logistics. I left work early one Tuesday after a meeting was canceled, the rare gift of afternoon sunlight in my own living room. I unlocked the door quietly, thinking I might surprise her with coffee. Her voice reached me first, not loud, but using a tone I hadn't heard in a while, soft at the edges, the one people use when they're allowed to be someone else. She was in the hallway, facing the mirror, phone pressed to her cheek. "I can't tonight," she said. "He's home." Not a he named for clarity. Mark can't. Just he, a pronoun with a precise reference in our home. Then a pause. Then a laugh, brief and private. She listened, nodded, pressed her lips together to keep a smile from showing up in her voice, and said, "Tomorrow? Same place." I stepped into the entryway deliberately, hanging my keys so the sound would announce me. She ended the call fast, like a light switched off mid-sentence. "You're home early," she said, warmth sliding over her words like icing. "Meeting canceled," I said, lifting the coffee cup. "Brought you something." Her eyes softened for real then, because she does love coffee and, I think, she does love me, just maybe in a way that wasn't enough anymore. She took the cup, sipped, and closed her eyes at the first taste. "You're good to me," she said, and something in me cracked, not from flattery but because I didn't know what the sentence meant anymore. That night, when she announced a sudden catch up with the girls, I didn't ask which girls. I wrote the time down in my notes, sat on the couch, and let the cat climb onto my lap like an apology I hadn't asked for. I scrolled through nothing and then closed my eyes. The apartment sounded like itself. The hum of the fridge, the soft plastic rattle of a plant label in the window. Ordinary, honest noises. Before I slept, I started a paper notebook, not just the notes app. Ink is weight, and I wanted weight. On the first page I wrote, "This isn't about catching you. It's about not gaslighting myself." On the second I drew 3 columns: explanation, evidence, feeling. I promised myself I would fill them in without judgment, like a scientist who hopes the experiment proves the thing they fear it will. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't plan anything yet. I planned to pay attention. If the truth wanted to be seen, it would show up in daylight eventually. And when it did, I wanted to meet it with my eyes open. The notebook grew heavier with each page I filled. Not in weight, of course, but in what it represented. Every line I wrote down was a moment I couldn't explain away anymore. Thursday, girls' night, but Sophie posted from home. Sunday, 90 minutes in bath, muffled laughter. Tuesday, call, he's home. At first, I thought writing would calm me, a way to release pressure. But the more I documented, the more I realized how often the small details lined up against her story. The evidence wasn't dramatic. It wasn't lipstick on a collar or a stranger's coat in our hallway. It was the quiet math of inconsistencies, patterns forming like cracks in plaster. Her time out of the house increased. She said she was joining a yoga class with friends, though when I checked the studio's schedule, the class she claimed didn't exist. Another night she left for drinks after work and came home smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. She hugged me at the door, the gesture quick, almost obligatory, and disappeared into the shower. I tried small tests. If she said she'd been with a friend, I'd text that friend later, casually, as if keeping up. Twice, the friend's response didn't match Anna's story. Once it was a, "Haven't seen her in a while." That stopped me cold. I copied the message into my notebook, underlined it twice, and sat staring at the page until the ink blurred from my eyes watering. Meanwhile, she grew more protective of her phone. Once, she left it charging in the kitchen while she stepped outside to grab the mail. It buzzed on the counter, and the preview showed a name I didn't know, followed by a heart emoji. By the time she returned, the screen had locked again. I didn't touch it. I told myself if I crossed that line, I'd become someone I didn't want to be. But the image of that tiny heart stayed with me longer than it should have. Money painted its own picture. Charges appeared at places we never went together, a boutique hotel downtown, a small Italian restaurant famous for its romantic atmosphere. The amounts weren't extravagant, but they were precise. 2 entrees, 2 drinks, always for 2. I stopped believing in coincidences. I started believing in patterns. At home, the space between us widened. We still ate dinner together sometimes, but conversation became hollow. She asked about my day out of habit, not curiosity, and her own updates sounded rehearsed. When I pressed, she grew sharp, accusing me of being controlling, of needing constant reassurance. I didn't argue back. I just wrote her words down, another entry in the record. The loneliness inside the apartment was worse than being alone. She was there, but not present. She smiled less, touched me less. At night, she turned away, clutching her phone like a lifeline even as she drifted off to sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing conversations I never had the courage to start. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was erosion. Every small lie, every late return, every unexplained laugh chipped away at the foundation of what I thought we had. And still, I stayed quiet. I told myself I needed something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way around, something I could hold in my hand and know, beyond doubt, that I wasn't losing my mind. One Friday evening, she said she was going to see Claire. I knew Claire. We'd had dinner with her and her husband not long ago. So I called Claire, casually, while Anna was gone. Claire sounded surprised. "No, we haven't made plans in weeks." "Why, is everything okay?" That was the moment the notebook turned from record to evidence. I thanked Claire, hung up, and sat in the silence of our living room. My pen hovered over the page before I wrote. "Friday," said Claire. Confirmed false. The words felt like a verdict. I still didn't confront her. Instead, I prepared. I started keeping important documents in a folder separate from hers. I set aside some money in an account she didn't know about. I told myself it wasn't about leaving yet, but about having the option if I needed it. Preparation gave me calm. It felt like packing a parachute before a jump. The decision came quietly, without drama. The next time she said she was meeting friends, I wouldn't stay home with my notebook. I would see it with my own eyes. Not to fight, not to embarrass her in public, but to end the guessing. The notebook had carried me this far. The next step belonged to me, and me alone. The night I decided to follow her, I told myself it wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about catching her in the act or making a scene. It was about finally letting my own eyes confirm what the notebook had been screaming at me for weeks. She left the apartment around 7, dressed more carefully than she usually did for a simple girls' night. A new blouse, perfume I hadn't smelled before, makeup with extra attention around the eyes. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, already halfway out the door. "Don't wait up," she said, and I nodded as if the words didn't cut deeper than she realized. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then grabbed my jacket and keys. My heart hammered in my chest, but my hands were steady. I kept enough distance not to draw attention as I followed her car through familiar streets, then onto a road that led away from the part of town where her friends lived. She parked near a small restaurant tucked into a quiet block. Not the kind of place for group dinners or casual drinks. The lighting was warm, intimate. Couples lingered at the entrance, holding hands. I parked a block away and walked carefully toward the corner, far enough to watch without being noticed. When she stepped out of the car, she didn't look around. She adjusted her blouse, checked her reflection in the window of a parked car, and walked straight toward the entrance. A man was already waiting near the door. Tall, dark-haired, dressed casually but neatly. His face lit up when he saw her, and hers did the same in return. They embraced, not the quick hug of colleagues, not the half-hearted squeeze of old friends. It was slower, closer, the kind of embrace that leaves no doubt. When they pulled apart, his hand lingered on the small of her back as they walked inside together. I didn't follow them into the restaurant. I didn't need to. That single moment outside was enough to make the last threads of doubt snap. Everything I had written, everything I had observed, it wasn't paranoia. It was truth, standing just across the street from me. I walked back to my car, my legs heavy, my chest hollow. The city lights blurred as I drove home, and the silence in the car felt deafening. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let the weight of reality settle into me, brick by brick. At home, I opened the notebook one last time and wrote, "Saw them. Together. No more doubts." My handwriting was uneven, shaky, but the words were clear. I closed the book and sat staring at it for a long while, as if it were a mirror reflecting back the version of me I had become, a man who had quietly documented the end of his marriage. When she came home later that night, she smelled faintly of wine and perfume. She smiled at me as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just walked into a restaurant with another man's hand on her back. She kissed my cheek again, softer this time, and whispered, "Did you eat?" I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. She disappeared into the bedroom, humming under her breath, and I stayed at the table with the notebook in front of me. It was no longer about gathering evidence. It was about deciding what to do with it. When the time finally came to confront her, I didn't plan a speech. I didn't rehearse lines in front of the mirror. I simply knew I couldn't keep living with silence pressing down on me. It was a Sunday evening, the kind of night when we usually ordered takeout and argued playfully about what movie to put on. Instead, I waited until she sat down across from me at the table, scrolling on her phone. I placed the notebook in front of her, opened to the page where I had written the final entry. "Saw them. Together. No more doubts." Her eyes lingered on the words. She didn't flip through the other pages, though I knew she could feel their weight. She looked up at me, her expression blank at first, then cracking at the edges. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice betrayed that she already knew. "It's everything," I said quietly. "Every night. Every lie. And last week, when you said you were with the girls, I saw you. With him." The silence stretched, heavy and sharp. For a second, I wondered if she would deny it, try to twist my words back on me, make me question myself again. But she didn't. She dropped her phone onto the table and pressed her palms into her eyes. I never wanted it to get this far, she whispered. Her confession came in fragments. His name was Michael, a colleague she'd grown close to on late projects. What started as venting turned into dinners, then something more. She said she hadn't known how to stop it, hadn't known how to tell me, hadn't wanted to hurt me. Each explanation fell thin, unable to bear the weight of what she had done. I didn't shout. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I just listened, my chest tightening with every word. When she finished, I said the only thing I could. You already heard me. Every day you lied. She cried then, real tears, not the kind meant to soften or manipulate. She begged for a chance to fix it, to rebuild what we had. But the truth was already too big, too heavy. Trust, once broken, doesn't return with promises. That night, she packed a bag and left to stay at a friend's place. The sound of her suitcase wheels rolling across the floor echoed like a final verdict. I sat alone in the apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock, sounds that had never felt so loud. The days that followed were a blur of practicalities. Dividing bank accounts, canceling joint subscriptions, answering texts from friends who asked why she hadn't been around, and deciding how much truth to tell. Some people expressed sympathy. Others looked at me with that half-hidden judgment that betrayal always seems to attract. Through it all, I kept coming back to the notebook. Not to reopen the wound, but to remind myself I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been paranoid. I had seen clearly, even when I wished I hadn't. One evening, weeks later, I shredded the pages. Watching the strips of paper fall into the bin felt strangely liberating. The proof had served its purpose. I no longer needed evidence to carry with me. The truth was etched into me deeply enough. The marriage ended there, but my life did not. Slowly, I rebuilt routines that were mine alone. I cooked meals for one, rearranged the furniture, let the cat claim the other side of the couch. The silence of the apartment began to change. At first, it was heavy, oppressive. But over time, it softened. It became peace. When I look back now, I don't think about revenge or what she lost. I think about what I gained. The clarity that love without honesty is just a performance, and the strength to walk away when the performance ends. The betrayal broke me, yes, but it also forced me to rebuild, stronger, steadier, and finally free.